Right, more on those headline stories for you throughout our time together. But for now, let's bring you this news on the go. 12 cheetahs are scheduled to travel from South Africa to India today. The wildcats will be quarantined for health checks upon their arrival there. They'll join 8 others who were moved from Namibia to Kuno National Park in India last year. Tumaole Mohlaoli is watching developments for us, joining us now live from Rooiberg this Friday morning. Tommy, take us through why this is such an important story to track.
Well, this is certainly something that is very, very important in terms of trying to rebuild the population of cheetah, particularly in the India subcontinent, because these populations have really been decimated over the course of a century or so. So this is what we've been told. We were given a briefing just last night about what the purpose of this particular operation is all about, and it's all about ensuring that the populations don't go to extinction. What is quite encouraging is the fact that the questions were abounding about whether or not this cheetah will be able to survive in the subcontinent there in India because of the climate and various conditions. And the experts here are saying that it will probably thrive because the conditions are similar, and being a medium feline, it won't have any problems in terms of hunting, and it's not really threatened by the apex predator, which would be, of course, the tiger. But let's give you a shot about what's happening now. As you can see there behind me, you would see that the cheetahs are being loaded onto crates. This is after they had been darted, and preparing from here, they will be going straight to OR Tambo International Airport, whereby they will be then flown to India. Now, the purpose of darting them is to ensure that they are not stressed out, and they will be kept sedated for the duration of that particular journey. So it is something that officials have been working quite tirelessly to ensure that the animals make it on the journey. One thing they also said is that, of course, they have tracking devices to ensure they monitor the cheetahs, so that when they do reach the subcontinent, that they can roam freely, but aren't going into the territories of course, poachers. So that was another question that came up about whether they will be secure, given the fact that they are almost gone in the subcontinent. So this is something that both countries are saying that they enjoy and that they applaud. We are now joined by DDG in the Department of Environmental Affairs. DDG, what would be the purpose of this particular relationship? Are these animals being sold?
These animals are not being sold. These animals are being given to the government of India in the interest of expanding our conservation efforts as South Africa. Cheetahs are a very important species. Obviously, they are listed as vulnerable. However, we do have instances where the populations are growing and even stabilizing. So this batch of 12 cheetahs that are being translocated from India are coming from a meta population of about 460. And we're hoping that by re-establishing this population in India, we might be able to grow the populations up to 1,000, which means, therefore, that the population globally will then grow in terms of population numbers of cheetahs in the world. Why we are doing this is because we've got a memorandum of understanding between the government of South Africa and the government of the Republic of India. And in that memorandum of understanding, which was signed in January, we are committed to enhancing conservation efforts in both countries, to scientific and knowledge exchange, and to also in terms of learning from each other as the two countries. You would know that India is part of the BRICS family, like we are. We are actually, South Africa, the chair of BRICS. This year we'll be hosting the summit later this year. At a technical level, we will be discussing how these conservation efforts can lead to many other conservation efforts that we can relate with India. And therefore, we're quite excited as South Africa in the sense that where they are going in India is actually in an open system, which is unlike here in South Africa where we have fences. And by them establishing an open system, we're hoping that there's more that we can learn in terms of how they adapt to conditions where they are not restricted in terms of of movement. Secondly is to say that they are going to occupy what we call an ecological niche. In the sense that because cheetahs have not existed in the last 40 years, it means that the space in the ecological niche was lost, and therefore they are going to re-establish in that particular ecological niche. So there's quite a lot of scientific and ecological knowledge that we are going to gain from this operation that is taking place.
Some other questions were asked about our own populations here in South Africa. Most of those cheetah populations are in private game reserves, and the question is, do we have enough stock, so to speak, to be sharing in this kind of bilateral kind of way?
We wish we had enough stock, but we are limited by habitat. And when we are limited by habitat, we don't have open systems where cheetahs can roam freely. As you know, that most of our nature reserve, game parks and national parks are fenced off, and therefore it's very difficult for the populations to grow under the conditions where they are limited by anthropogenic forces like land use changes that are taking place. However, I think because of the legislative developments that we've had in the country over the years, we've seen a move away from agriculture into game farming, or game management, where we have seen interest in farmers moving from your traditional agricultural practices in terms of crops for daily livelihoods into a system where we grow game in the wild, and therefore in South Africa, we are largely limited by habitat. So if the fences were down and the animals were roaming very freely, I'm sure we'd have much more cheetahs than we have.
Right. And on this issue of farming of wildlife, quite controversial in some sectors, would this not be turning wildlife or using conservation as a means to make a profit in terms of the debate around the illicit flow of wildlife, poaching of rhino? We have these game farms where rhinos are supposed to be protected, and yet it is still being massacred. Is this not just cash for conservation?
No, it's not. It's not. Because we subscribe to legal use and legal trade. As a country, we subscribe to a policy of sustainable use. And sustainable use in the sense that the benefits of sustainable use is that it's also a conservation measure in the sense that you are able to retain and grow the population. As you are using them, you are also able to grow the population. Let me give you an example. We have an issue with elephants in Kuno National Park because we've got too many elephants in Kuno National Park. They are now starting to destroy the mopani trees and the baobab trees because there's just too many elephants, and therefore in that particular case, what do you then do? So culling is an acceptable conservation measure, as an example, that we need to cull. And the other thing is that it's very expensive to manage these animals in conservation areas. So for instance, Kruger spend in excess of about 11 million a month just to secure the rhino population, just to give you an example of the numbers that we are working on. So conservation is not a very cheap operation to run, and therefore we need to look at measures in which, whilst we are conserving, we can also sustainably use within the confines of a legally allowed system.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for that update. So in terms of what is happening now, Goli, as well, is that from here, the cheetahs will then be taken to OR Tambo, whereby they'll be loaded onto aircraft, and they will make their way then to, of course, the subcontinent there. And the view is that when they get there, they will also be quarantined. By quarantined, it's just to ensure that the process of them acclimatizing to their new environment and getting the necessary support and necessary medical attention in terms of the veterinary services. And also they will be tagged to ensure that their movements are monitored and that they're kept well clear of any would-be poachers. But that is back to you in the studio.
Tumaole Mohlaoli left us there from Rooiberg in Limpopo. Tommy, thanks very much indeed.